My name is Howard Goodfellow. I was born in 1942 on the Goodfellow family farm. My parents are Doug and Bertha Goodfellow. My grandparents are Cecil and Edna Goodfellow. I have 3 sisters. My oldest sister, name is Edna May, and my 2 younger sisters, one is Betty Ann and the other is Grace Marie. Goodfellow Farm is located on Goodfellow Road, about a mile north of Codrington off Highway 30. The family starts back in 1841. The Goodfellow immigrated from Ireland. They left Ireland because they could not see any future for their family. And the family at that time was a family of 5. They left Ireland with the hope that they would be able to buy and own a farm in Canada. When they arrived, they found that life in Canada at that time was very harsh, and that they quickly realized that it was going to be very difficult for them to become farm owners. In 1859, a peddler that was traveling around the farms said, "There's gold in California. It's so easy. You just walk along the river and you pick up nuggets of gold." The 2 of the sons at that point decided, we are going to California. So the son, William, who is my great-great-great-grandfather, along with his brother John, left and went to California. And they went to California when they found there was gold there. They started sending gold coins back home. They convinced their other 2 brothers, the Charles and James, to also come to California. And so with the money that they got, and they were able to buy farms in the Brighton area. My grandfather, in 1932, bought a 100-acre farm. The importance at that time was realizing that they needed to have more land, and it was very common at that point for farmers to have very large families. And my dad at that time was the oldest in a family of 8. And so he had to stop school when he was 14 years old and started to work on the farm. My dad continued to work on that farm until he was 90 years old. So our family has been doing research on the Goodfellow family. I was surprised to find out that my grandfather attended a private school. I was surprised to hear this because I spent a lot of time with my grandpa on the farm, and he never once mentioned that he attended a private school. It is very unusual for a 100-acre farm with very low income and your oldest son to be going to a private school. For me, an even bigger surprise was to find that my great-grandfather bought a 1912 Model T Ford. This Ford, at that time, cost $850. All transactions were by cash. Model T Ford has no use on a farm. You could only use it for a few days a year, and in the wintertime it was also it was just put in a shed and not able to be used. The surprise then is, why would you spend $850 on a Ford car when you could buy a 100-acre farm for about $2,500? It's still a mystery in our family of how and why my great-grandfather would decide to buy a Model T Ford. Also surprising was that my uncle ended up going to the University of Guelph, taking courses in agricultural engineering. So I'm going to talk about life on the farm. Life on the farm has to center around all of the farm buildings. The picture that you're going to be looking at is going to show first, which is the farmhouse. Now this farm was built in 1888, and it was a new farm for my grandfather and grandmother. And the building itself, the first is the house. It was a very standard house that was built. You'll see it throughout the farming communities. Not a large house. It was a 2-story. It was about 600 square feet. Next was a milk house. The milk house, that was an important part in terms of both summer and winter to be able to store the milk. The milk would be stored in containers and then taken to the actual cheese factory. Next was the drive shed. It's actually a garage on one side. That's where the Model T Ford would have been. On the one side, you can see a single car garage. The other part of this big shed is where the machinery would be stored. The next building that you're going to see is the pig pen or pig house. There's a small pig yard right beside it. And then the building in behind, which you can't see, is where the breeding sows would be. And most of the time, I think, while I was there, that we had 3 sows we would keep in that actual barn. Beside that barn is the big cow barn. This is where the cows were kept. And with those cows, there was also you can see the size of the barn that has storage for hay and for grain for the cattle. The next building is a horse barn. Horse barn, you can see, is essentially the same size as a cow barn. My grandpa used to tell me that they would have up to 9 horses on the farm. During the time I was on the farm, we only had 2 or 3 horses. There's a big hen house, but you cannot see it, but it's in behind the horse barn itself. And the other kind of area you might see in behind the horse barn was a big swale. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our activities as a kid and what I remember. Life on the farm was fun. Everyone said it was hard work, but there was always lots of things to play. Most of those were activities that you created by yourself. I enjoyed playing hockey. The swale would freeze over, and we would be skating there. You would depend very much on the weather. Of course, if it snowed, you had to go and clean the snow. After school, dash home to go play a little bit of hockey before it got dark. Most of the times we had skates that really didn't fit. Playing hockey, often your feet would get cold, so I tell when we'd come home at lunchtime, and often your feet are frozen. So what you would do is you would sit in front of the wood-burning stove, open the oven, put your feet in the oven to be able to allow to get some warmth in your feet yourself. And Mom would just let me leave our skates on when we came in the house, and would come and sit at the table itself. We also enjoyed playing baseball during the summertime. Baseball was quite simple. It was just in the front field. We shared that baseball diamond with the cows. So the usual story is to always be careful that you didn't step in a cow plop. If you did, the game would stop for a minute while someone scraped the cow plop off, and then the game would continue from there. The other thing I remember is we had a swimming hole. And when you go to this swimming hole, when I think about it now, I can't believe that we did it, but it was actually the creek. Cattle used to come and drink water from it and walk in it. So I'm sure it was not very clean water. I remember whenever we would get out, you had leeches, and everyone would check that somebody else, your friend, to remove these leeches or bloodsuckers. Unfortunately, on our farm, we also had a sand pit at the back. That was a great activity for us to jump in the sand, slide down the hills. Then we were always looking for Indian arrowheads in that pit. We did have a creek. I remember to go fishing. We'd never catch any fish, but we'd always try. And we also had lots of chores, what we called, on the farm, that would keep us busy in terms of feeding calves and other just little chores I used to do around with my grandpa. One of our chores was to collect eggs from the hen house. These would then be washed, and then would be taken to the store in Warkworth, and there we got the amazing price of 60 cents a dozen for the eggs. So I'm going to talk about the changes in the farm. Initially, we had no electricity. We had no plumbing in the house itself. So the first big change was in 1937 that we got electricity. My great-grandfather was one of the first persons to, because you had to pay for bringing the hydro to the farm itself and into the community. But there was also a very significant expense. So what they ended up doing was the most important place to get electricity was to the barns. So all the barns were the first to get electricity, and that was done in 1937. In 1938, we finally got electricity in the house. With these changes, we're now able to get electric stoves, able to get refrigerators, beginning to have actually running water in the house itself. So that was a big change in the farmhouse itself. For sure, mention about our furnace. We had a furnace that was called an octopus furnace, and if you can see why it is called an octopus furnace, because it has so many ducts that run off from the furnace itself. So that also was a big change. Before that, there were just little fireplaces or little stoves in all of the different rooms in the house. So now we finally had this octopus furnace, and we're able to get heat to all of the different rooms in the house itself. So I attended local public school. It was SS number 25, Mount Olivet. It was about a 1 mile walk from our farmhouse to the actual school. In this one-room schoolhouse, I think the time that I was there were around 15 to 20 students total. As I now reflect on this school, I realized that there were more than 40 Goodfellows that attended this school. That was opened in 1888, and also realized that during that time, until it closed in 1956, there was always a Goodfellow in attendance at that school. I can remember when I received this letter in the mail that I had been accepted to study engineering at the University of Toronto. I was obviously very excited. I always thank very much my mother and father, who stressed the importance of education and wanted to make sure that all of his children had a chance to go to school. Went across the road, told my grandmother, I was so excited. In September, I'm going to be going to university. And she started to cry. I understand why. The reason is that The tradition in farming is the oldest son is the one that takes over the family farm, and that in my family, I was the only son, and that had been going on for generations and generations. The good news is the Goodfellow farm, still in the Goodfellow family, is my sister. Her two sons, Carl and Kevin, now continue to farm the Goodfellow farm. So I'm going to talk about the changes that happened on our farm, the Goodfellow farm, during the 40s and 50s. There were some very important changes happening at that time. Probably the first major change was a move away from horses being replaced by tractors. Remember, I had mentioned earlier that we had 8 or 9 horses at one time to operate a 100-acre farm. So we started the tractors, which would replace horses. The other major change in our family farm was that we moved from a mixed farm to a dairy farm. And the mixed farm, before you were growing lots of other crops, when you decided to become a dairy farm, you had to start producing milk year-round. Cows produce milk for about 10 months of the year, and then they're dry for 2 months. So at that time, again, a big change was my dad decided to produce milk and to buy a milk quota. For 365 days of the year, produce X number of pounds each day. And you had to produce it in the wintertime as well as in the summertime. First of all, you had to change to make sure that you had to meet your quota during the wintertime. The way to do that is you had to increase feed for these cows, because in the summertime, they were out on pasture, and we get all the protein and all the food that they required for milk production. But in the wintertime, all you do is feed them dry hay, so you had to have an added expense of buying protein, completely different ways of crops that you would grow, and how you would feed these cattle to be able to produce the milk for the 365 days of the year. At that time, there's the social fabric of farming changed. And what happened is farmers became much more independent, and there's no need to have these large families. So with the tractors and with all these changes, that we were now able to produce and increase productivity on these farms. Because we'd had this farm since the 1880s, that I was walking on paths in the same buildings and doing the same kinds of things that my family had been doing for generations. And I must admit, when I was doing it as a little boy, I never thought about it, but I sit back and reflect, what a wonderful experience to be able to walk on the same path as my ancestors. What a wonderful time it was. How lucky I was to grow up in a farm family. This is the Brighton I remember.